So a couple things. First, there are things about the market that's changing. So whether you like it or not, customers are expecting a completely different experience from insurers today. What does that actually look like? And then we'll have a look into, you know what, there are a bunch of disruptors in the market that are already rethinking what that experience is. And where are they getting these ideas from? It's not actually thinking about the technology and then thinking about what they can do. There's actually an unmet customer need in the market right now. And being able to capitalize on that opportunity and then delivering the experience or the proposition in a completely different way, that helps capture customer demand. And then lastly, what does that future of customer experience actually look like? So what are we seeing in the market in terms of where things like digital, virtual reality are actually being experimented in this space as well? So first and foremost, what are the things that are driving these customer experience changes or customer expectation changes? There are drastic movements within the demographic and social changes. So within Asia, and not within Asia alone, globally as well, we're looking at rising life expectancy and declining birth rates. So for insurers, what does that mean for your customers? How do you get them to think about protecting their life and wanting to grow their wealth together with you? Rapid urbanization, so this one's not new to us. Service and offerings and marketing, it's everywhere. Everyone expects ubiquitous access, and technology makes that possible. So with that comes a lot more choices, a lot more offers. So what are insurers doing to differentiate from everyone else in the competition? And it's about connecting with that experience more than anything else and not just coming up with new products without thinking through about how the customers want to use it. The shift in global economic power, so this one's not new to us. We've seen tremendous growth, especially around China, Asia, within the last 30 to 50 years. And having had double-digit growth for such a long time, we're now embarking on a new journey. How do insurers compete in that future world where everyone else is thinking about differentiating on the customer experience? So are we truly differentiating on the customer experience, or are we just thinking about customer experience as an obligation? And lastly, technology advances. Technology advancements within digital, it is how millennials, which is the future generation, it is how they want to engage. It is part of their everyday world. It's not about communication. It's not about platform. It's about being exactly where they are, when they want the services, and be relevant to them at the right time. So with that in mind, these are the future generation that will be building the Asian economies. And they have a completely different level of engaging with businesses today. And these are not just specifically within insurance, but if we think about how do people shop today? How do people actually want their services delivered to them from a banking perspective, from a travel perspective, from protection perspective? Are they looking at specific traditional industries where they'll buy these services from? And these are the type of questions and challenges that all industry face, not just within insurance alone. So within banking, wealth management, asset management, even technology companies, there are now a blurred line of how do you actually deliver what the customers want to them, because they don't necessarily separate these as different types of products anymore. I want these propositions delivered to me where I want it. And these days, it typically is within the mobile access, on the social forums where they engage, and then being able to actually meet a person and speak to someone when they feel like it. But then it will be on their terms, no longer on the business's terms. So we asked the question, given that we know that digital is coming, it's part of everything that we do, so we shouldn't think about it as a different channel or a new technology. It is just part of everyday world right now. We asked the question in our Insurance 2020 survey, would you buy a life insurance product online? And alarmingly, the difference between China and India compared to that of the US is much higher. So the willingness to actually engage differently in this part of the world is a lot higher than we see in the West. And why is that? There is actually, it could be from economic changes, it could be from the lack of infrastructure support that was never there before. So in a sense, they leapfrog traditional access to channels, traditional channels like your physical agent network or your banking branches that are physically there previously. They want to engage with people differently. So 90% in China said they would, compared to 89% of consumers in India. And looking at the US is still only 65%. We also asked the question of whether or not they were willing to exchange their own personal information for something that's more relevant to them. And not surprisingly there, we see China and India with 63 and 77% respectively compared to that of 49% in the US. So there's a much higher willingness to actually trade personal information knowing that I will get something back in return. So if it's just if it's just broad-based marketing, probably not. But if you're gonna offer me something that is personalized and specific to me, then yes, you can have my information. And lastly, a little bit of a controversial one here, given that it's not really in reality this side of the world yet. But do you see yourself using digital currencies like Bitcoin in the future? 58% in China said yes, 71% in India, compared to only 28% in the US. And where is this coming from? I think largely just by behavioral consumption in China alone, given that the internet giants like Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu are really reshaping what customers feel is going to be the norm and where they see and place their trust in as well. So do they place their trust in insurers, or do they place their trust in their everyday brand that they feel is part of their everyday life, in how they interact in shopping and payments, in consuming media, whatever it might be. So that really then takes us to the sort of three pillars that we see underpinning what will change the customer experience in Asia. One, industry boundaries. So your competitors today may not necessarily be your competitors tomorrow. And quite honestly, your competitors tomorrow are already competing within your space. So what are we doing, and what are we offering that's actually different to what the internet giants are actually penetrating into right now? Social networks. So we spoke about social networks. It's really not just a communication tool at all. It is how they engage, and it's not really just engagement itself, but also it is a place where propositions are actually developed. And why is that? Because the boundaries of how you can take different types of partnerships within the same ecosystem, that has been removed and made a lot easier in a world that China is more familiar with today. And infrastructure, last but not least. You won't ever actually see it from a consumer perspective, but blockchain. Everyone talks about blockchain. What does blockchain actually mean? When you live in a digital ecosystem world in the future, and we're talking about sharing identities, customer identities across multiple different partners, how do you ensure that their data is actually secure? And how do you actually ensure that this is the person that will be provided services by this partner versus that other partner, and provide a single source of truth for that customer? And this is where blockchain really comes in. So in today's world, where we talk about partnerships, we haven't really necessarily seen a lot of success in this area, where we're talking about the physical exchange of information between the insurer and the other partners, and having to pass on that type of data points. I think you have more trouble and challenges trying to identify who that person actually is and whether or not these data points even match up. But in the future, given that it will be digitally engaged, it will be in a social forum, it will be over technology platforms that don't necessarily exist in the form today, that will become something that's very powerful in making sure that you know where that customer is, regardless of whether they're interacting with their wearables, through their mobile, or through a physical channel. So this is just a landscape of where the internet giants in China are actually embarking on this space. It looks, it sounds like everything's happening right now, but if you look at where the journey started, it really started almost 10 years ago. They started in third-party payments, entering the money market funds, and life insurance, non-life insurance back in 2013, and all the way through to life insurance today. So they're slowly taking parts in different parts of the value chain and across the distribution that's not necessarily just within insurance alone, but across all areas of financial services. And this is really where we're seeing the blurred lines of, are they an internet company? Are they a finance company? It's internet and technology really enables the drive of different industries to come together. And at the moment, the internet giants have the power and the competitive advantage in having the best platforms to enable that. So social platforms, again, we talk about it not being just a channel for engagement, but then a channel where propositions are actually made. So Tencent partnered with Guoan Group in China, and they offered the first online-only life insurance named Hetai Life Insurance. Digital identity, so risk profiling has always been the bread and butter of what insurance companies do, but when there's a different way of looking at how you actually assess your risk in areas where, to be honest, you actually don't have that much information about your customers at all, not like it is in the West, where you have social security IDs, you have a history of knowing that person is probably who they say they are. But in areas like China, India, and the rest of Asia, where we're really starting to see these economies rise up in power, there's a different way of looking at them because these type of information is really not that accessible. And China's looking into scoring and risk assessing customers differently based on something on social called sesame credit. And why is that happening? There's a higher level of trust placed on a customer's engagement on the social platform, knowing that they have a reputation for paying for the purchases that they wanted to acquire. They have a good reputation. They have a referral network that provides them with a certain level of feedback. That is more powerful than actually knowing physical information about the customer themselves. And lastly, social and P2P. So, propositions are no longer just developed between a business and the customer itself. We're talking about, at the pure level, there's a lot to offer. And the money market that we're seeing in China is really the best example of where that proposition doesn't exist, where the banks aren't actually providing the loans to the consumers at micro levels. So we see micro lending really take the shape there. And of course, there's lots of risk associated within that as well. But if you even stretch it to companies in the West like Friendsurance, we're really starting to see the concept of social pooling coming into place. And why is that? People want to pay for propositions that are actually meaningful to them. I don't want to pay for what I don't need. I want something that is relevant to me, and I want it to be very specific to points of time in my life. And blockchain, I think we don't need to go through this one in too much detail, but basically it gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how it actually works. It's a centralized ledger of securing customer information onto something that's cyber secure. But what it doesn't do, as much as once you enter the blockchain, you know exactly who that customer is. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't mitigate the risk of putting the wrong person on the blockchain. So this is really where we're starting to see not just blockchain, but then biometric security upfront as well, where you make it so easy to identify your customers upfront with biometrics capabilities that is quite honestly more secure than airport security these days. So by combining these few things together, you're really getting a true sense of, I really know who my customers are, and therefore I know what they want. So here's a little glimpse into a couple solutions that are already out in the market. This is nothing new, but it's a video that we prepared just to capture the type of propositions that actually bring in customer experience at the heart of the design and then delivering a different type of solution to customers. So what you really saw there, and it's just a quick snapshot across the different propositions that you saw in the video, was a micro savings fund that really takes into consideration of what the consumers are really shopping for online and being able to integrate that and knowing at the right time when to actually prompt them proactively to suggest pushing something into their fund savings. Second one that we saw was around dynamic incentives, so really using and integrating wearables and Internet of Things into how you would incentivize your customers differently and help reward them for taking the right step towards a healthier lifestyle. The third one that you saw there was about contextual protection, so really bringing in together the use of big data, GPS locations, accelerometers, and providing contextual offerings to the customer at the right time, and about protecting their family, something that's close to their heart, but then being meaningful as well. So it's not about the technology, but it's about the experience that you actually deliver to the customer. Social pooling, so this one's not new. There's definitely been a lot of hype of this in the West. We're really starting to see customers really want to pay for something that's relevant to them, and they're finding a community of people that have similar needs as well. And lastly, integrated partnerships. So bringing it all together. This is really where insurance is no longer just insurance. People aren't looking for just insurance. They're looking to protect their life. They're looking to grow their wealth. They're looking to integrate a bunch of their financial services offerings, if you like, that's meaningful within the context of their own lifestyle, and then thinking through about, what type of partner do I actually want to seek those services from? And in the future, it may or may not necessarily be an insurance company if it doesn't change from today's landscape. So with that in mind, what does that future of customer experience look like? We then started looking into, how does virtual reality actually start shaping some of these experiences in a different way as well? So they're not commonly used at the moment, but insurers are definitely partnering with technology companies and ad agencies in helping visualize a couple different use cases. So it goes from anything with simulated education and safety, so car simulation, helping customers understand better the type of behaviors that they should be having when they're driving, and what mitigates risk from having to, stumble across in accidents or have preventative measures on helping them understand what would reduce their premiums. And then there's training, so anything from training with safety, security specialists, and people on the job, so helping them think through what industrial safety standards look like. There's marketing to VR gaming platforms. This is actually one of AXA's own as well. So really entering the VR world and thinking, how do we engage the VR community better and the gamers better? How do we help contextualize what is important to them? It may not necessarily be their own life, but it could be their avatar that they value. And risk assessment and claims and contextualized data visualization. So thinking through, you don't have to be there to risk assess, properties or disaster locations where things have taken place. So having a virtual reality to be able to assess the client or the site itself without being present and putting yourself in danger is incredibly powerful. And lastly, around data visualization, helping executives make better decisions around different things by contextualizing it within the environment that it should be in. And this can range anything from, an example that I heard recently was, when you think about asset management and property funds, what if you could imagine that landscape being built over a Hong Kong property landscape market and being able to see data points at the right place and the right time, and then helping executives make better decisions around, therefore, what should we be looking at? So these are just some of the examples right now. None of them are actually progressed much in the market, but they are experimenting with it. So I think this is an exciting space for us. In other industries, we see a lot more examples where, for example, hotel chains are starting to look into virtual reality and helping customers imagine what that next holiday destination could look like. So I will pause there and leave there unless you guys have any specific questions. We do have a VR booth that's set up outside, so do have a play. It's not in the context of insurance, but then later it's just a way for you to visualize exactly what virtual reality setup could look like and the experience of how you can interact differently in the digitally engaged world. Thank you.